excited to be here. My name is Colin Levy. I am a filmmaker currently living in Los Angeles. I recently realized that I have been using Blender at this point for over half my life. So it's great to be here again in Amsterdam. Was here last for Agent 327. This time, I want to talk about the passion project that's been taking the last 5 years of my life, SKYWATCH. I'm here with my visual effects supervisor, Sandro Blattner, and our 3D lead, Pavel Shamoji from Poland. We've been working together for like 3 years, and this conference is the first time we've actually all met together at the same time. So I hope that some of you were able to catch the movie at the Suzanne Awards last night. You guys are the very first audience to see it. Not completely done, but we're getting very close. So that was a really exciting moment for us. For those who haven't seen it or watching online, SKYWATCH is a sci-fi proof of concept short about a couple of hacker kids in the future who get in over their heads. It's live action, about 10 minutes, tons of visual effects work, all done in Blender. So this is a visual effects talk. There's lots to get through. We'll try to do it quickly. But we're excited to be releasing the short online very shortly. In the meantime, just want to start off with the teaser trailer.
All right, who's next?
Dude, this is so bad.
Just one more swap shot.
We're gonna get caught.
Hold on, check it out.
Oh.
This is the perfect swap.
What is it?
Oh, you'll see.
Enjoy your order.
Mike, what's it doing?
You're getting an error in the drone.
Oh my God.
Attention. You are in breach of the Nextport Corporation's Terms of Service Agreement. Please remain where you are, and someone will arrive to assist you.
So we have been working on this film for a while. Some of you might remember back in 2014, we did a call for artist help. Does anyone remember that? It's so far ago that we barely can remember. So last year we did a Kickstarter, and we're very lucky to raise $50,000. Really exceeded our expectations, and for that I owe a huge thanks to the Blender community. You guys really supported this project. If you did back it and you haven't said hi, I would love to meet you and thank you in person. Free hugs to all my backers. Thank you. We have spent all your money. Couldn't have done it without you. Even though we did, have a chunk of change to work through, to do work at the level we were trying to do proved to be pretty challenging. And it kind of came down, a lot of it, to me and Sandro kind of sitting down and churning through shot after shot. We had a ton of help, which we'll go into a little later, but I just want to talk about Sandro, who is my guardian angel on this project. I'm excited to be sharing the stage with him. He works by day as a compositing supervisor at Methods Visual Effects Studios, I'm just going to hand it over to him for a quick overview of the visual effects challenges for SKYWATCH.
Thank you, Colin. Thanks, everyone. Really excited to be here. We've been waiting for this moment for a long time. Like Colin mentioned, just want to go over some stats of the project. We had a total of 202 visual effect shots, which is pretty ambitious for a 10-minute short. We had over 60 artists contributing across the globe, and it was all remotely, and people working in their free time and on weekends. And we had 4 small-ish VFX vendors offering their help as well, which was huge. We had a VFX budget of around $35,000, which mostly came from the Kickstarter, so thank you everyone who backed us on that. We spent 4 years in post-production, which is a very long time for 10 minutes. And 2.5 years of that was shot production. So there was about a year or so of editing and post-vising and doing some pickups. And then we kind of dove into the shot work after that. And the primary tools on this project were Blender and Nuke. We pretty much used Blender for just about all the CG. It was about 95% of the CG work was done in Blender, and the compositing was done in Nuke. So here's just a little snippet of the spreadsheet that we had to deal with. So project management was pretty rudimentary. We used spreadsheets and Google Drives and Dropbox and all that stuff. We also used a free tool called Productive, which no longer exists, to manage our tasks. But that was pretty much how we ran it. And so yeah, I would say let's just dive into the actual work of it, and I'll hand it back to Colin to talk more about the previs and post-vis work that he did in Blender.
So we're going to get to some juicy renders in a. We're going to go back and forth. Yeah, we're going to get into some render stuff, pretty images shortly. But I want to talk about previs and postvis, which is probably what I spent just as long on, honestly. And Blender for me has been a crucial tool in all the films that I've made, which are all shorts. Just in the process of figuring out what I want to make, just in the planning process, as crucial as screenwriting. So I want to talk about this previs, which you'll see is pretty shot for shot. In the weeks leading up to production, I did a bunch of previs work to help us figure out what exactly we were going to shoot. So I set up the sets and the camera in Blender to accurately represent the locations we were going to be in, as well as the lens kit we were going to use, so we could really know exactly where, when we got to the day, to place the camera and how to frame the shot. But equally as important as previs was post-vis, which is basically the process once you've actually shot the thing. If there's going to be a lot of CG elements within the frame, just kind of taking that plate and like this the drone plate here, and placing it within the context of a shot that is working. So I did a lot of cheap iterative work. In Blender and After Effects, just trying to do as loose of a job as possible just to figure out the flow of a sequence or a scene. And that was really crucial and took over a year on this project. I also want to talk about the opening Nextport commercial, which is sort of a spec. It's a very ambitious spec commercial for a futuristic technology. And this is another thing that the Kickstarter helped us produce. We had a stretch goal that we were able to meet, and allowed us to shoot this thing as an additional project within the project. And I basically had this idea for a spinning camera move that swoops through walls to show 4 separate vignettes of customers basically receiving an order at their Nextportal appliances. And I was really excited to do this. Wasn't exactly sure if we could technically pull it off, but once we decided that this is what we were going to go for, we kind of got into our locations, which were all just borrowed from friends. And I took some measurements. In this case, I did a 3D scan, and I did a technical previs pass. Because of the voiceover and the timing, the specificity of that camera move, it ended up being crucial to do this process to really work out that there was blocking and staging. As you'll see, we have a guy in the middle of the frame operating the camera for a couple of these vignettes, and this is what we worked with for the visual effects. We had to paint him out completely and replace him with the CG assets. So this is the final version of the commercial.
Enjoy your order.
Whether you're stocking up or eating in,
We'll do it together.
heading out,
I'll meet you guys there.
or treating a friend, Nextport delivers.
All right. So one of the most fun parts of this project was the development of all these assets that we had to create in this world. And so the idea was there was a system where drones would deliver shipping pods. They would drop these shipping pods into distributors. Distributors would distribute them into tubes, and from there they would be delivered into people's homes. And in those homes, we had appliances called the portal. And what you're looking at here are some early concepts, sketches of what those portals could look like. And all of these designs were done by our concept designer, Matt Bell. And it was a pretty extensive process for us to work out what those should be. So this portal had to basically be able to receive this pod, open it up. It had to have a UI interface, and it had to have some way of presenting, the order that you'd be receiving. So from those sketches, we would then go into a more kind of refined development phase where, we did some rough models for that. And actually here what you're seeing in the top row is pretty close to what we ended up with. So that was, for all our major assets, that was a pretty significant step of the process. And then the same thing had to happen for the drone, which was probably it was the most important asset of the movie. And so the drone, again, it had to fulfill a number of purposes. It had to be able to pick up pods and deliver them. It also had to be able to unfurl guns, because it turns into kind of the villain or the nemesis further on in the story. And we had to approach the whole thing also with the mindset of being, this Nexport corporation, and think about how this drone would have to be mass manufactured, what materials would be used, etc. And so what you're looking at here is the kind of final design of the drone that we landed on. And this was kind of like our blueprint that we handed off to our modeler, Jonas, who is here in the crowd with us. Hey, Jonas. So this is the model that he came up with, and this kind of, covered everything that we needed it to do, and you can see it unfurling its guns here. And then from there, we handed it off to Pavel, who is joining us here today as well, and he took care of the look, depth, and shading for not just this asset, but pretty much every major asset we had on this movie. Here you go.
Thank you. So I want to talk about the materials in that drone. When I first got the model, it looked like this. So it's a great model, but as you can see, it's not realistic. And we have here three major materials: the light grays, the dark gray parts, and then the light stripes. So I had to start somewhere. So I started with the light stripes. All I did was just make the original stripe transparent, added another one underneath, added a texture, and here we are. And then it was time to decide what the drone is made of. I was thinking maybe painted metal, like R2-D2. It would be easy to shade. And of course, Colin wanted plastic and carbon fiber. So I had to Google plastic, and I saw the white ones I was aiming for. So the material is set up with three separate textures. I was painting them directly in Blender because I didn't want to deal with the seams. So I set it up so I painted separately the decals, the dirt, and the scratches, and the nodes took care of the rest. And then with the carbon fiber, I used the same textures for this material, and I didn't have to care about whether it was carbon fiber or plastic. I just painted it, and then added a weave. I painted the weave in GIMP, and that was it. And put together in the model, it looks like this. And that was the first variant. Then I got this one. It was all rigged, animated with guns, and because of our workflow, actually there's none of my materials in this model, so I had to reapply everything that matched the parts to this model, and then had to shade the guns, but this time, fortunately, I could do the painted metal with the guns, so it was quickly done, and here's the final version. And the final variant of the drone is the one that falls down and cracks. So it had to look believable, and it had to look like it's still operational, but you can see the damage. And I tried to sculpt in and model the cracks, the shards, and I was happy with how it looks. And then Sandra said, it looks like a cracked eggshell. So we went for something else. And here is a singular crack and some scratches. And then with the texture added, it looked like this. Most of the damage is at the front, and then some dirt. And actually, the final thing I did was this shot you saw earlier in the commercial. It's the opening shot of the movie, and it was my favorite thing to work on. The original plate looked like this, and then I had to do set extension. So I modeled the furniture, matched the lighting, and then had to add some clutter to the shelves to make it look like it's something. And the last thing was to animate a dummy that mimics the actor to cast the shadow, and then everything together animated looks like this. Yeah, and giving it back to Sandra. Thank you.
So there were also a lot of pretty extensive environments we had to deal with for this project. We had apartment complexes which were partially matte painted and extended between Nuke and Blender, and we had full rooftop CG environments that were fully done in Blender. And so I'm going to hand it right back to Colin, who's going to talk more about his process of reprojecting and creating that environment.
Yeah, so I want to talk about this particularly challenging shot, KSG 310. Basically, I'm not a perfect filmmaker, and the first version of this movie I put together really did not work. I screened it at work at Pixar and got some terrible, like, really harsh critique, and kind of went back to drawing board for a couple sections, and decided, okay, we got to reshoot some stuff on the roof. And the challenge was that we didn't have access to the rooftop location anymore. So this was the plan for like one of the shots in this sequence that we needed to get. The second pass got more ambitious. But we found ourselves on a green screen stage to get the live action element of our lead actor. And the plate is to follow. Obviously, the rest of the shot had to be CG. Kind of boxed ourselves into a corner there. Not ideal. But essentially, the rest of the shot I put together in Blender. And I made a little, I guess I'm going to show the final first. So we were fortunate enough to we've done a lot of sort of photography of the location when we were first up there. And it was all taken on an overcast day, so lighting wasn't really an element that we had to be too concerned about. And so I made heavy use of the UV project modifier and the clone tools to basically model really rough, objects piece by piece, and then projected, basically matching our photography from the location, and combined a bunch of those projections into a single UV map for each of these objects, sort of just marching through them. Because it was sort of a low light situation, we got away with a lot. So it was sort of just impressionistic, and then adding some details, breaking up some shapes, adding some dirt, and then here's the shadow dummy that I also animated similarly. And this is sort of the pass that sort of came out of that. And there was a lot of comp work to make this sing, but then just animating and running out of memory. So all these shots are environments, including the last one, CG reprojections. This is entirely CG shot. Thank you.
All right. So we don't have a ton of time to dive into compositing, but I just want to go over a few things real quick. Just as far as rendering is concerned, we rendered a lot of it locally, and we used renderstreet.com to get some of the beefier shots out. We did depth of field was mostly handled in comp, as we would normally do in a production environment, just to be able to control all the different elements at the same time. And then motion blur was sometimes rendered and sometimes not, depending on how our render times worked out. And so really what we tried to do is to insert Blender into a kind of traditional VFX workflow. So, we were comping in Nuke, and instead of, say, rendering in V-Ray or Mantra, we wanted to just really see how seamless we can, get Blender in there, and it really was pretty seamless. So the one thing I do want to talk about, because we thought it was kind of interesting to mention, is that we usually do a shader breakout when we are working with other render engines. And so the Cycles shader breakout is basically looking like this, which is diffuse plus glossy plus transmission plus subsurface plus emission equals your beauty render. So you can break down your beauty render into those different components, which are all additive components essentially. And then each of the first 4 components, they break down into a direct, an indirect, and a color component. So knowing the math, which is showcased here, we can basically go ahead and do the same thing in any compositing package. So in this case, you're looking at a Nuke node graph. It's not nude. So basically we'd render multi-layer EXRs, and each of those components would be available as its own AOV. And we can just go forward here. So basically we're breaking this down and putting it back together in Nuke, which allows us to control each individual component separately.
Yeah, hit play.
Yeah, right. Thank you. So I'm just jumping through real quick here, showing some of the different components. You can see the glossy components, the transmission components, and the emission over here. And so the output at the bottom matches exactly what my beauty render looks like. So now I can go in with a great node and control my glossiness separately and crank up the reflection if I desire to do so. Or I can go in and say color correct my direct diffuse. If for whatever reason I feel like I need to modify the color temperature of my lighting, I can have some amount of control in comp instead of having to go back and re-render the whole thing. Which to some of you guys might be kind of boring because it is basic within a VFX, typical VFX workflow, but if you're used to rendering full beauties and not really going to comp, this is, I think, pretty useful to know because it saves you a lot of render time. So just to kind of round off, not just the compositing, but kind of general work, we have a little highlight reel, really quick highlight reel with some before and afters to give you also a bit of an overview of the work that was done here.
Thank you, thank you. So just want to talk a little bit real quick about the future of SKYWATCH. This is a proof of concept short. This has always been part of a bigger dream to make something bigger. And so this is just a quick clip. This is the biggest conference room at Pixar. We filled the whole thing with our note cards for the feature outline that we've been working on for about the same period of time as the short itself. So we are writing, and we're hoping to basically pitch the short when we finally release it, or pitch the feature with the short when we finally release it. So we haven't really set up social media so well, but we do have a Twitter account if you want to follow us along. We could really use all your help when we finally do publish on YouTube to get it out there. It would really make a lot of difference. Thank you again for everyone who's supported this project or worked on it, because there's a lot of you. Really appreciate it, and thanks for having us.